Everybody, and welcome to the CineFix Top 100, the endless secret government warehouse where we keep 100 of the greatest movies of all time. I'm Clint Gage, and joining me as usual, the woman that drank us all under the table that one time in Nepal, Alex Stedman. Alex, how you doing?
I'm good. I'd be curious to see if I could actually do that. We'll try it one day.
We got to try it one of these days. Next time we're in Nepal. And, of course, one of CineFix's top men, Michael Calabro. How you doing, Michael?
Good, dude. How you doing? Weird
aside from me accidentally, aside from me accidentally calling you Michael, I think we're doing all right. How's Cal doing? Cal, you doing okay?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing better now.
Good. Well, very excited today to be digging into to this movie that I personally, it's an all-timer. Certainly, it's one of my favorite movies that launched one pretty all right sequel, another sequel that's incredible, and two others that we frankly don't need to talk about. But today we're going to be talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, the very first Indiana Jones adventure. On a scale of 1 to excited, how excited are you guys to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I wouldn't say that I'm excited to talk about Raiders. I have a lot of opinions and very recent opinions because I recently binged all the Indiana Jones movies. So I have a lot of thoughts on the Indy franchise at large. But I didn't really grow up with Indy much. And I think there's this weird phenomenon that we kind of see sometimes where if you grow up with the imitations rather than the classics, you kind of have an affection for the imitations. Like, I feel like The Mummy was my Indiana Jones. Not saying it's a better movie. I objectively don't think it is. But like, I grew up with The Mummy, you know? But still, let's talk about good movie.
I thought you were going to say Benjamin Gates there for a second.
the desert adventure part of your film appreciation was taken up by The Mummy.
Yeah, it was. That was the sleepover movie. Listen, Brendan Fraser, come on. Harrison Ford's also great, but come on.
Yeah, it's strange to go like, I mean, listen, Brendan Fraser, come on. When Harrison Ford is the other option.
I know. I heard myself and then I caught myself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so listen, I mean, just the basics, the nuts and bolts of this movie. 1981, directed by Steven Spielberg, obviously. A screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan, produced by George Lucas, which this makes it like a murderer's row of new Hollywood dudes all working together on one movie. Like if Brian De Palma had been the second unit director, I guess it would have been more so. But this again, it was Indiana Jones. It was the birth of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So to just dive straight into the pedigree of it, I mean, it was great at the time. Made a ton of money that year. 9 Academy Award nominations. Got nominated for, let's see, best picture, director, cinematography, original score. Those were all nominations.
It didn't win for score?
No.
That was my question. What?
John Williams, I don't know who. Somebody look up who actually won that year while I rattle off the rest of these. The 5 wins that it did get, and deservedly so, I think, with trophies for art direction, film editing, sound editing, and, of course, visual effects.
But not score.
But not score. Somebody else won score, and it better be a great.
I'm finding this because
piece of music.
Like, score is. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I think the score is my favorite part of it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I mean, maybe at this point,
I'm looking it up. I'm looking it up.
At this point,
now.
John Williams had a couple of iconic scores under his belt, like between Star Wars and Superman, and
it does have. Do you know what it lost to?
Was it another John Williams score?
It was not another John Williams score, but it is an equally iconic score. Like, I can't believe that there's actually like it lost to something that like you could debate what one is better, but this one is definitely in the fight, which is Chariots of Fire.
Oh my God. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would pick Raiders, but Chariots of Fire is a legit iconic score as well. So at least it won a loss to an icon.
It lost to something that we can still make jokes about.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of that too. I feel like there's a lot where like John Williams does not have as many Oscars as you would think he does. And I feel like he just always just kind of loses to another great score.
I mean, that's the thing about John Williams is like every time out, he's going to do something great. And so it's like, there's that idea of it's sort of his by default. you know, unless somebody else jumps up to take it from him. But like at this point, Indiana Jones was his third more or less consecutive, like super iconic between Superman, Star Wars, and Indiana Jones.
What about Jaws?
And well, Jaws is in there too. I mean, of course, like he is just rattling off all-time bangers. And so by this point, it's like, yeah, no, we know you're good, John. We're going to give it to somebody else.
I did look it up, and he has won 5, which is, I mean, more Oscars than most people. So I feel a little less indignant about it. It's a lot. It's a few Oscars.
I mean, 5 as compared
It's a
to
handful.
Yeah. If they were handing out rings, he'd be moving on to the other hand at this point. But anyway, it didn't win score, but it did. One of the things that I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot later is the visual effects, which it won. Went to one of the guys involved, Richard Edlund, one of the founding members of ILM. So it's like these early day ILM guys are all bringing home hardware at this point. But Joe Johnston involved in that as well. He got the Academy Award that year too, because he was on the visual effects team.
Don't forget about our boy Chris Wallace, who made the fly happen. You know, we talked.
Yep. He wasn't on the visual effects team. He didn't get a trophy.
He's makeup though, right? Like,
but he's yeah. So he's on the, I guess, special effects department. I don't know. Who knows? But so anyway, I mean, this is another movie that there's this crew in this time period that, like, the ILM guys, the Star Wars moving, and they'll do Poltergeist the year after this, where there's a lot of similarities in the work that they're doing between Raiders and Poltergeist, especially like the ghosty stuff that happens at the end. But we'll get to all that later. But it's a really cool time for effects, for practical effects and visual effects, sort of hanging out together. But then there's a Steven Spielberg of it all. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a super fun era of filmmaking, I think, because there's a lot of people that are like going from project to project, whole teams of artists that are just kind of bouncing from one thing to the next. And then one guy goes and splinters off and starts his own company and then starts his own team. And those guys bounce from one project to the other. And there's like a lot of really talented people doing a lot of really cool work, right here before CGI takes over, kind of in the early to mid 90s, so. It's a rad time for artists, I feel like.
I agree with you. I think that this is where like commercial cinema as we know it today was its probably most artistic.
Yeah. And the other thing too, like this, we might be getting ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about this more later, but I feel like so many of these guys are artists of, that aren't necessarily film first artists. Like they just happen to be working on movies, but they're craftsmen of different trades that are being applied to movies in really ingenious ways, which I don't think we see as much of anymore. And I could be wrong about that, but there's something really nice and kind of old timey, frankly, about that, which is why I love this. I love the early 80s from, a filmmaking perspective. I imagine the early 80s had other problems, but I was too young. So the other fun thing about this is Steven Spielberg, because it's so easy to kind of like, yeah, he's always been in charge of everything. But like, if there was one vulnerable spot in his career, it was right in front of this movie. 'Cause like Jaws was a huge hit. Close Encounters was a hit, but they both ran long and they both came in over budget. And then 1941 ran long and came over budget and was a flop. And so all of a sudden, like there was a little less patience for him, I think. And so like his whole goal with making Raiders, I found some quotes from him like on set, since some behind the scenes stuff, is like his whole goal with this movie was to bring a successful movie in on time and on budget. Like that was item number one on the agenda for Spielberg, because like if there was a moment where he was going to have a little less sway, it was right here. Like he needed this to be on time, on budget, and a success. And he was like shooting from the hip. There's the quotes that I found was things like, him telling George Lucas, like, we're not doing 20 takes of anything, and we're not going to do like 16 feet of dolly track for this one shot, because we're just not going to do it. And then like, I'm not going to stop down between set and get the little piece of hair out of her face. And like, we just got to go. And he did.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of other, when we get to some other brilliant moments, I think there's a handful of other spots where you can kind of see that happening, which I think, it's that sort of kind of mother of invention sort of thing happening with, like, they came up with some really, really sharp fixes for that mentality.
And I think too, like, I remember seeing that Spielberg actually wanted to make a Bond movie before he did Indiana, and then Lucas is the one who was like, no, do this. I wonder if that's almost him trying to not take as many risks, because exactly to what you were saying, he was in a really kind of sensitive place. But one of the things that I really like about Raiders is that you kind of see the lessons that he learned on Jaws. Like, one of the big things with Jaws was him learning to not show the shark too early. And I feel like you see kind of that invention, that creativity a lot on Raiders.
He also prepped a lot, right? Like I was watching like the behind the scenes stuff, and it's just like every single shot is storyboarded, and it's just like, like he's talking to like Lucas a lot, and they're like, yeah, Lucas is just like, yeah, he preps a lot.
Yeah. Well, that was part of the thing. Like, previs was a huge part of his like, I got to get this shot. I got to get this in the can on time. And it's, I'm not going to go over budget. And that was, previs was a huge part of that. And then, between that and then like not doing an excessive amount of takes and, like they did. So there's, for as cool as the visual effects are and as award winning as they are, there's not a ton of them. Like,
no, I was thinking the same thing.
It's mostly stunts, and like the stunt stuff is incredible.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, I mean, that's the fascinating thing too about this movie is like Spielberg was kind of shooting from the hip a little bit, and he made just an all timer. Like, he's like, yeah, I'm going to make one cheap and on time, and it turns into a goddamn masterpiece, which is impressive.
Well, there's so many good little decisions that are in this movie. Like, and I the more I think about it, the more I do like it. It's just so many like things that Harrison does in particular that Spielberg kind of lets him do. So much of the stunt work, like you said, it's just like so many little things that all just, it's great.
Well, and just like the idea of surrounding yourself with talented people and saying like, I don't know, fix it. Which is, we've talked, we did a whole art of the scene on the Wrath of God sequence at the end. Cal, you did that last year. And like, just, there's a sense of just like, he just handing a pile of ideas to, Joe Johnston. And he's like, can I do whatever I want? He's like, yep. That's pretty much it. That was, I think, largely the approach to this movie. Lawrence Kasdan, he wrote the screenplay. Story by George Lucas and was Philip Kaufman was the other name. But Kasdan wrote the screenplay, and it seems like he did some really good stuff in the 80s. Like, this is...
if only he was doing real good stuff now.
I know, right? That's what I said. He did some real good stuff in the 80s. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a...
Talk about a run, right? It was like Empire, then this, and then Body Heat.
Yep. And then even like, I mean, The Big Chill is one of my favorite. Like, I love The Big Chill, and Silverado was good, and like it's all. He did a ton of stuff in the 80s that was really solid. He was punching above his weight for sure. But there's more to do with him, and I think there's an interesting talk too about kind of some of the arguments that between Kasdan, Spielberg, and Lucas, like hashing out what this movie was going to be and who Indiana Jones was going to be. And I think, Alex, a lot of the small things that you like about it, that you're responding to about the small little character beats and sort of the rough around the edges parts of this movie. Like, I think a lot of those, from what I can tell, a lot of those were from an argument that Kasdan won. Like, I think that there's a lot of, which we can get to some more of that too, because like you're talking about Spielberg wanted to make a Bond movie, and there were moments that Lucas wanted him to be like a playboy and, and things like that. But like when they whittled him down to, he's this guy that clearly feels pain, and he gets beat up, and he kind of, he's able to kind of keep going. But he's every man is all hell. And he's like this kind of nervous professor when he's not out in the field and all this stuff. Like all of those little things feel like Kasdan's wins, right? Because I think Lucas and Spielberg both wanted them to be this Bond level, like infallible hero who also shows up at the door in a tuxedo and there's a woman waiting for him. And like it's that kind of thing, which that kind of thing is gone completely from the character. And he wasn't around for Temple of Doom, which is why he gets the white dinner jacket and the red, flower and all that stuff in the beginning of Temple of Doom. But
I also think, to your point, that makes Karen Allen's character that much more special, right? Because talk about being like the opposite of a damsel. And I mean, I'm sure we'll get into just like her just like ripping shots in Nepal. And then it's like, not only does she just like rip shots, but like she then fends off the Nazis and like is never like, though she gets saved, she's never like the damsel, and like she holds her own again, like with Indy. And I think that's like, to your point, it plays better that Indy isn't a playboy, that she's not just like the flavor of the week or like the flavor of the cereal kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it.
It makes her feel more unique,
I have a lot of thoughts. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on Marian, and we'll go over them. But to your point, Clint, I just the reason why Indiana Jones works as a character is because everything he listed. Like he's always an underdog. He's always scrappy. He's always getting his ass kicked in a way that any of us would get our asses kicked. So yeah.
Pain and fear and like surprise, like all of that registers in
also kind of a jerk sometimes. Like there are so many times where I'd be like, no, he's not. And I kind of like that though.
And that'll be the last thing we tease before we get it. The one little thing that we need to discuss about pedigree of the movie is Harrison Ford, right? Like I don't want to have that Han Solo versus Indiana Jones discussion, but like, is it because Harrison Ford at this point, particularly, and they still didn't want him. Like Tom Selleck
was supposed to be Selleck,
had
right?
the part,
yeah.
And like George Lucas was like, I don't want it to feel like you're like my guy or whatever. Which that was part of the thinking where he just didn't want Harrison Ford to also be Indiana Jones, but at the same time, like, who else? Tom Selleck, no, just the answer is no. Like
he wouldn't have felt as much like a
been
guy.
Harrison Ford.
Yeah, like Harrison Ford. He feels like a really like he's someone who looks like a Hollywood actor, but he feels like a dude. At least in Indiana Jones, so he is someone who is as skeptical as any of us would be. And I think we shouldn't go into the Han Solo versus Indiana Jones thing, but you see so much overlap and so much of what he learned from Indy on Han, I think.
Well, yeah. At this point, he had Star Wars and Empire under his belt. He showed up in Apocalypse Now for a minute, which was cool. But then after, it's hard to argue with him in the 80s. Between this and then Blade Runner and Witness and Frantic and stuff like that. Like he was killing it in the 80s. And I think
but this is the thing that unlocks that door for him.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of his like trajectory, like Han Solo always made him a star for sure. And then also getting to be Indiana Jones was just
it's insane. Like I was trying to think of a good modern day equivalent, and we do have, a lot of Marvel stars that are also, but like I can't think of someone with more of a star-studded run, I think, than Harrison in this era.
We have a lot of Marvel stars that can't carry their own movies outside of Marvel. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like they appear in a lot of stuff, but they're not the star that Harrison was during this time.
Right.
Tom Cruise, he could do that, right? Like, but
But like in Tom Cruise movies, I don't know. It's just not the same.
No, he's not. No one's Harrison Ford, right? Because like Harrison Ford carried these like two franchises, and like the third is like Jack Ryan, because like then Jack Ryan came in like the late. Is that just straight up the 90s, right?
The Patriot Games I think was late 80s. Yeah. And then Clear and Present Danger I think was because Clear and Present Danger was he was then you get into the Fugitive and clear and present danger.
Right.
And that he's starting to show his age a little bit in his everymanness in the 90s. But
dude, 90s Harrison Ford still rips, man.
Yeah. Is when he started running. Harrison Ford runs as though he's in like 2 feet of water. Like it's this weird stomping, and he just looks so goofy to me whenever he runs in the 90s. Same deal with Air Force One, like action, him doing action. It's like this crazy, weird stomp, like he's running through water. It's hilarious to me. Next time you watch him run, just think about that. Mm-hmm. So that'll do it for the pedigree. Unless there's anything else in general you guys need to talk about with this movie before we dive into some brilliant moments here. I think we teased enough of them up front that we should probably start talking about them in depth. But let's start right up front with the beginning. This temple sequence.
Talk about all the Jaws cues, right? You just don't see him as he's like kind of like working his way through the jungle and through the jungle, and it's only when he has his like hands up that's like the face reveal. It's so cool.
Yeah,
it's a great character reveal.
And for it to be, and I think this is the first hints of like what makes him so good as a protagonist is he's actually not a great dude. Like they introduced him like a bad guy. Kind of like, I mean, he's all lurking in the shadows and you don't really know what he's up to. And you feel bad for the people that are following him because like, he's just like, he grabs a little dart and he's like, yeah, whatever. And then he's like, oh my God, this is poison. It'll kill us instantly. Like we're like, what? And he's just casually walking into it and bringing these poor people along with him. That's how we meet him, and then fending off a guy that's trying to shoot him in the back, which is crazy. I also watched this yesterday with my daughter, who is 8, which was this movie I've never not had memorized. Like I saw this movie when I was a very small kid, and so like there's no fresh way to watch this movie except with like my 8-year-old daughter, I think, which was kind of fun because this is a sequence when he turned around and walks into the light. She was like, "Oh, that was him this whole time." And
so it was her first time. It
was her first time watching it. Yeah. She's never seen it before. So she did have some interesting tidbits that I'll pepper in throughout this some of these scenes. But it was honestly illuminating to watch this movie with a kid who, number one, like being my kid, like I make her watch a ton of movies, so she sort of gets movies in general, but like she has no idea who Indiana Jones is. She has none of my baggage, and so like watching it was amazing to watch her respond to certain filmmaking things that this movie does so well. That's like that base level of like, this is a universal language of cinema that humans understand, like whether or not they have been to film school or not. Like, so the idea that she was surprised by this, she's like, kind of thought it was a bad guy to start with. She's like, oh, that's him? Like, weird.
I like that a lot because I was thinking about almost comparing it to the reveal in Terminator 2, where you figure out that Arnold is the good guy, but you would have that ruined for you if you had seen the trailers. I was wondering, like, if you had never seen anything about Indiana Jones, if you didn't know that Harrison Ford was the good guy, would you think he's the bad guy? And I kind of think you would.
I mean, at the very least,
for like 2 minutes, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. For just a couple of minutes up front, or at minimum, like you would have known. I guess if you'd seen the trailer and you knew that this movie was coming and you knew that Harrison Ford was playing Indiana Jones, like maybe you just don't realize that it's when he turns around. I mean, it is a star turn and walk towards the camera, and you're like, that's Harrison Ford. I recognize him. But anyway, like it was great to see that intro holds up on like a caveman brain level, like.
Yeah, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but there's 2 really good character introductions in this movie. I think Marian's almost as good. I really like her introduction too. But the other thing I appreciate about this, and when I was just rewatching it a couple days ago, I just really appreciate how pretty it is. Like it makes the jungle look so gorgeous, and he does the same kind of thing to the desert later. Spielberg, it's just nice to look at,
Yeah. Light streaming through things is always great. I mean,
he loves the sun. Loves the sun.
There's always a hazer working, or there's always wind kicking up sand, or there's not, and there's just like this bright, crazy, light shining through a window that you can almost reach out and touch.
They love burning tires in the plane fight.
Yeah, exactly. Just fight. Like, how are we going to get smoke? I don't know. Set some tires on fire. But the rest of this intro, this temple sequence is, I think, worth studying. Like, this is another one that that boulder chasing him is so iconic. And the way that they slow play the walk into it and establish every little thing that comes back later from the bag, the sand in the bag, and then you find out what it's for later, which is another thing that even my daughter was like, that's what that was for. So it's like making a meal out of a thing up front, but not talking about it, like visual cues. And then like it comes back later and you're like,
there's so much of that in this movie. There's
so much of that. Like the burning the thing on his hand, like the way that they revisit that, and it explains something that we saw on screen 20 minutes ago, but they don't, they just do it casually like that. And that's, but I love this scene. Forrestal. I had the thought too, watching this, that Forrestal, his competitor who died in the cave, like if this were Star Wars, Forrestal would have a Disney Plus series. Like I kind of, if he was a contemporary of Indiana Jones, I'm sure he's got 20 years worth of adventures that we could see,
Well, they make it seem like he's going to be the main villain of the movie, which is another thing I like. And then he's just, nope. But I also, one thing that I found out when I was just kind of like looking stuff up. So, when they have the tarantulas on the back, this is not a torf. I'm not blowing a torf. Apparently, did you guys know that tarantulas are cannibals?
They eat other tarantulas?
They eat other tarantulas?
They eat it. Yeah, so they had to separate all of it, like the real tarantulas by fake tarantulas, so they wouldn't eat each other. Anyway, that's just a fun fact.
Huh.
Yeah, so when you see them on their backs, yeah.
Yeah, I knew that they're not like poisonous or particularly dangerous for us. They're just big and hairy and terrifying to look at.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't know they were cannibals. Crazy.
Yeah, they don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about us, but worry about them eating each other.
Yeah. I do think by the time everything's going nuts, like the amount of stuff that you learn about Indiana Jones in all of this action is also and this is the first instance of seeing him, like, you see how capable he is going in and out. And then when he jumps across the thing after Alfred Molina, ditches him with the whip. And he's grabbing onto that root, and he slides back, and he's like, yeah, he's smiling because I got it, I made it. And then he slides back with the root. It's like, that's that first moment of like, oh, this guy knows he's in danger and he knows he's in trouble. Like
well, Spielberg really knows how to like extend those moments, right? Just like, is he going to make it or not? Right. Like the other moment of that, and like, from that scene that I always think about is when Indy is about to grab the idol. My like favorite Alfred Molina shot of all time is just as like the slow dolly in, like so close, yeah. and then it cuts back to Indy grabbing the idol, and it's just like.
It even, I think, it mixes in a pan past some of the faces carved into the wall that the arrows are shooting out of, and like yeah, there's.
And just like to prolong that moment, just like the pregnant anticipation of almost getting the idol is so good. And it's replicated later too in the escape, and how they can just extend these moments of tension for like an extra beat that adds so much to like the quality of the filmmaking,
Well, and even just the choice to like look at the idol and then weigh the bag and then lose some of the sand. And then like even just that choice of just like take one moment longer to think about this. Yeah. And of course, John Williams is not award-winning score, just kind of like, just kind of like getting at the back of your neck the whole time. It's an incredible sequence. The other thing that I love about this cold open and meeting Belloc as soon as he gets out of the cave. Yeah. And this is a thing that, and Cal, you and I have had this conversation. We had this conversation a little around Dial of Destiny too. And this is why I think where Crystal Skull as well and Dial of Destiny, one of the things that they did wrong, I feel like, as an Indiana Jones movie, is the cold open. The first action scene was connected to the main story of the rest of the movie. The fact that he's getting an idol that's unrelated to anything, like we're meeting him on an adventure that is in progress, and the rest of the movie is about a different thing. So like, there's no narrative lifting that has to happen, and so it is all character stuff. Right?
Yeah, it's all vibes. So, this is
it's all we got to meet Indiana Jones. We got to get a clear idea who he is. And then we get to meet Belloc, right? We get to meet his rival. And then we know that. And when Belloc comes back later, we already know who he is. We don't have to meet him. So like characters, dynamics, and vibes, to your point, like that's all the heavy lifting in these cold opens. And there's zero story being told that's going to be relevant after we get back to the world. They did that in Temple of Doom. He was on a completely other adventure, and that's how he meets, Willie. And then we get, it's more of a straight line because there's like the plane crash or whatever. But it's the same deal with Last Crusade as well, where the cold open is him as a kid, and it's a different adventure. It establishes a couple of things. It establishes like his hat and sort of the guy that he's impersonating for the rest of his life, and then also his dynamic with his father. And so it's like those are the two important things about that cold open, which I think once. The cold open of Crystal Skull is him finding the Crystal Skull, and the cold open of Dial of Destiny is him finding the Dial of Destiny or whatever, which is like, it doesn't work quite the same.
Yeah. I actually didn't even put that, not to talk too much about Indy at large. I think that is one of the things that really bothered me about Dial of Destiny, and it just went on too long. But what I like about this is that it's quick. I mean, how long does this last? It's like maybe 5 minutes, if that.
No, it's longer than you think it is. Because don't forget,
it feels really quick.
Because you also have to outrun the boulder.
Yeah, he flies away with Jock 12 minutes in. Almost 13 minutes in.
God, it moves so quick.
Well, it's extremely well paced, right? And there's all these different segments because it's just the reveal. Then they have to traverse the stuff that's like semi-dangerous. And by the way, the use of like decomposed skeletons in this movie are so good. They always pop up in spaces. So like, you see them as they're coming in, so it's dangerous. And then there's like the moment of like right before the climax, which they really extend, of like grabbing the idol. And then they have to run back through all the things that they teased with the boulder that you didn't even realize was a thing. So that adds all that drama on top of that. And then once they successfully navigate that, then it's running across the hills, start the plane, and then like
you gotta have a conversation with Belloc in there in the middle.
And then he has
to, a lot does happen.
Yeah. And then he has to throw the fishing pole. He's like, oh shit.
I love Jock. I wish we got more of Jock.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
I'm surprised that we didn't. He's great.
Well, also to that point, Cal, you brought up Alfred Molina, his film debut. And then
Alfred Molina does so much heavy lifting does he have a line? I think it's just.
He's got a couple.
He's got a couple.
Yeah.
Because he just does so much acting with his face there to push like so much emotional beats and like just like, extend the drama. It's so good. He's so memorable in that.
And it's such a small
he's got the first
role.
line actually. Poison's still fresh, 3 days.
Yeah.
But also to your point, Alex, like it is fast. Like we're just rattling off all that stuff that happens in only 13 minutes. And it happens really skillfully. It is a fast, very incredibly well put together 13 minutes film. And also my daughter said, I love it when in action movies, people have to run away from boulders, which to me says that Raiders is so iconic and it's been homaged so many times that my 8-year-old daughter is aware of the trope of people running away from boulders in action movies.
Well, that's the funny thing about this scene too. Like that's the scene that you think about when you think about Indiana Jones. I don't even think it's the best part of this scene. I think him kind of jumping out of the room with the gold statue is kind of the best part. The boulder is great, but it's crazy to me that became the iconic iconic image behind it.
where it's placed in the sequence though too is like, it's just like, oh, what now? You know, and even that look on his face too, when he like turns around and sees it, he's like, oh God. There's just one more thing that we weren't prepped for. We were prepped for all the darts. We were prepped for the thing that got Alfred Molina, the jump over the little the pit. We were prepped for all of that. We were not prepped for the boulder, you know? Also, so like the boulder is a thing that's like, oh God, now here's another thing.
Also, that may be just like one of the most exquisitely composed shots in the movie, right? Like
it is very cool.
It is designed to be a poster. It has like multiple layers, right? And it's like a nice wide shot, but it's a low angle shot. So not only is it looking up at Indy and you get the profile of his face, so you get to see his back turned, but you see enough of his face that you know like the horror. And then there's this just huge friggin' rock that's just rolling down, and it's just like, well, what do you do? It's so good. There's a reason why that's like on posters. It's so iconic because it's so dynamic and it instantly conveys drama.
And to Clint, your point about like, but to your point about it being like, oh my God, another thing. I think when, you know, Harrison lands and you see his face after, I think that's where you first see that moment of, oh, he's tired. Like, and you see that throughout the movie, especially at the end, after he's had like event after event. But that's really where you like get it set up. I think that like, he's a dude. He's not a suit. Like he's
wary from the jump, from the beginning. Cause even like him, like pulling his gun out to hand to Belloc, like he looks in pain and he looks tired, and that's how we meet him. Like, and this is well before it's not the years, it's the mileage. You know, the line.
I was gonna say it.
yeah, but that's been we've seen that on him and in his energy for the whole movie up to that point. So, but then the other thing too that makes this, and this is not a thing that may register for anybody but me, but the fact that we more or less hard cut from this adventure to him being a nervous professor.
I love this scene too.
So great. So like that minute 13 to minute 14, all of a sudden he's got his glasses on. He's trying to remember how to spell Neolithic. And then he's like, after class, you know, he's got his papers and stuff and he can barely carry them. And he's like, what do they want to talk to me for? Like he's this nervous, kind of nerdy dude all of a sudden after what we just saw him go through. And it's like to juxtapose those two halves of Indiana Jones so immediately like that, I think is another thing that makes that whole open even better.
And you kind of learn his weakness in that opening scene, because not that it's subtle, but the snake in the plane, again, another payoff paid off later. Yeah.
Yeah. Literally screaming, I hate snakes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just Reggie.
Oh, that's just Reggie.
Reggie. What a great name for a snake.
The Adventures of Reggie and Jock needs to at least be an animated series.
That would be adorable.
There's a big snake in the plane, Jock! Oh, that's just my pet snake, Reggie! I hate snakes, Jock! I hate them!
I mean, that opening scene, I mean, we did a whole art of the scene on it years and years ago about the production side of things. And the way that they went about it, like the boulder being, you know, there are estimates anywhere from 300 to 800 pounds that like, which isn't, you know, proper boulder weight, but like, man, that'll hurt somebody. They're just doing it all in camera. Yay for the early 80s.
There were a lot of practical stunts. Also, I do want to, it's part of this, I think, is you mentioned the introduction to him as a professor. One thing that always gets me every time I watch this movie is the weird moment where the woman blinks and it says "love you" on the eyelids. It feels so out of place in the moment, and you can tell he's very thrown off by it, but it's just such an odd touch. But also it's kind of realistically touching on the fact that he's Harrison Ford and that yes, students would probably be very attracted to him, but he's still like you were saying, a nerdy dude.
Do you think that she wrote that on her eyes herself?
No,
she had to get a friend?
I've thought about this. She had to have a friend do it. Like, imagine trying to do that yourself.
Because you can't like close one eye like naturally, right? And then write backwards.
And then to also do it in the mirror, writing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta red rum it on your eyes.
Honestly, even if somebody else does it to you, that's still a talent. Like that's pretty good. But yeah, I think that little moment feels like a leftover of the Lucas wants to make him a playboy kind of energy. Like
That's
I imagine
what I was
that was
thinking.
in it. Yeah. I bet that there's some, which is funny to think about. Like, even if on the day Spielberg's like, yeah, no, all the women want you. But to have Harrison Ford still being so flustered by it is it's a fun beat.
Yeah. Cause like, aside from the whole Marian thing, you really don't see women throw themselves at Indy throughout the rest of the movie.
Only in a classroom.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. Only in a classroom setting. But we can move on, I think, to there's just one, I think you mentioned it earlier, Alex, about the fun little moments that are all kind of built into this, which I flagged a couple too in this meeting with the government, the G-men, Porkins from Star Wars, soon to be Eckhart from Batman. But there's those. So this is the scene where he's describing what the Ark is, where they come and they tell like Ravenwood was in a Nazi communique, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of very dry expository stuff, right? It's just explaining things and it's flipping open a book and he's literally drawing on a chalkboard. Like, here's what it is. But there's a couple of moments in there that make this scene really, really sing to me. And one of them is there's a cutaway to Porkins. I can't remember what his name is in the movie. He says something and then he like eyeballs Indiana Jones a little bit. Like he gives him a look up, down, like, I don't trust you. And then you can see Indy, and not even a reaction shot, but you can see him in the foreground of the shot of Porkins, like reacting to it. And there's these moments of like, it's those character building tiny little moments. There's another one in the same scene where Marcus Brody's looking at him and just beaming with pride as he's explaining what the Ark of the Covenant is and what the city of Tanis is. And he knows all of this stuff back to front. And Marcus is sitting there like with this paternal kind of glow on him. And it's those tiny little moments in this scene that is literally just exposition explaining the stakes of the rest of the movie that are really engaging.
Yeah, there's like a lot of, I think even within the two government guys, even though they are very distinct from one another, they're very different in their temperament. One's a little more like willing to kind of put up with Indy where the other is not. And it's like, they didn't need to do that. It's just nice. It just builds it out
of them too, right? Yeah. Because he's like, didn't you guys ever go to Sunday school? And one guy's like, well, I but then
I
Porkins
also
just
wonder if
ahead.
That was discussed in Sunday school. I don't know. I didn't go to Sunday school, but
the Ark of the Covenant? I don't know. Depends on which Sunday you went, I suppose.
That's not any catechism.
Yeah.
Or at least not for the Catholics.
But I do also, when they introduce the Ark of the Covenant, that is when you first get like, because John Williams, of course, has like he has themes for each and everything, and that's where you first get that Ark of the Covenant theme, and it just really struck me upon a rewatch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the way that John Williams uses stings in this score is really something else, which I'll go ahead and skip ahead to quote my daughter again on one. When he gets on the plane to head out on the, and we see Todd like is on the plane with him. And I asked, or Frankie said, well, who's that guy? And I was like, well, what do you think? And she's like, well, he's a bad guy. I'm like, how'd you know that? She said, well, because he was peeking above a magazine and that's always suspicious. And then also the music was kind of scary. And I was like, yep, nailed it. That's
that's the point.
That is exactly what it is. Like, my 8-year-old was saying like, well, it's always suspicious when you peek over a magazine. It's like, sure is.
But like, I've seen people, not to go off on a tangent, but I've seen people use kind of, the music was trying to tell me how to feel as almost a criticism of certain movies. I don't think that's a bad thing. I like that John Williams tells us that he's a bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it works. I mean, it depends on the moment too. Like sometimes it can be, it's like anything else. Like sometimes it can be a little on the nose and a little sort of like, okay, I get it, man. But in a movie like this, in a movie like this, like this is a big pulpy adventure novel of a movie, and that's as it was designed to be. And so like having that blah, 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 like when the bad guy shows up, it's like, yeah, no, I get it. He's a bad guy. And now I'm worried about him because there's a bad guy sitting 2 rows behind him on that plane where they're handing out champagne. It's like, God, travel used to be so much better.
Cooler.
Yeah. What else did I have? Oh, the other thing that she said was, it's one of my favorite lines of the whole movie. When Marcus is at his house, and he's like, they want you to go after it. And they start talking about the boogeyman and all that stuff. And he's like, you know what a cautious guy I am. And then he tosses a gun into frame. And like, that's a character moment for him. And it's like, oh yeah, no, he's not afraid to shoot a guy, I guess. But then my daughter says, well, he's not cautious. He just threw a gun. It's also a really good point. But let's move on to meeting Marian, because we're getting there. We've been wanting to talk about this scene in depth for a while now. So I mean, my thing with this scene is that there's no way it would exist anymore. I don't think there's any way that this scene is built the same way. Like when you're meeting the heroine of your movie, playing a drinking game in a dive bar in Nepal. Like, I think if you make this movie right now, she's teaching orphans ballet or something silly like that, you know, like
she's an altruist, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But I love this scene. I also love that it's not Indy watching her. Like there's a version of this where Indy walks in and he kind of stays at the back of the crowd and watches the drinking game. And so the scene is kind of his scene in that way, but they don't do that. It's her scene. It's very much her scene.
Mm-hmm. And that's, so I love Marian, and like the more I think about her, the more I love her. But to your point, like this is truly, truly, truly our introduction to Marian. I don't think she is mentioned at all. Ravenwood is mentioned, but Marian is not. We don't know who this woman is.
There's that moment between Indy and Marcus where he's like, "Do you think she'll be with him?"
Oh yeah.
We get a little bit of they've got a history.
Yeah.
But that's it. I don't, you know.
Yeah, but you kind of immediately.
The least of your worries, Indy.
That's right. You're right.
Sorry. Again, this movie has never not been in my brain. So.
No, but she is almost introduced not as, I don't know. One thing that I like about Indy is that he's kind of a scumbag, and this kind of introduced is also kind of a scum. Like she is drinking these guys under the table, and I love her for it.
I mean, I see Marian as like she's tough as shit. And she's been stuck. Like she even says it. Like I got stuck. I got dragged around this whole world while my dad was searching for his trinkets, and like she's had a tough go, and she's like surviving. And you know, she's tough as shit. She's great.
Well, it tells you a lot without seeming like it's telling you a lot. Similar to how we were introduced to Indy. Like we don't learn everything about him in that cold open by him just telling us. And I think this introduction to Marian does a good job of both showing and telling. Like we know she's a badass because she's drinking all these guys under the table. But then, it drops little story character beats in there.
Yeah. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it also very subtly implies that they got they started their relationship in a classroom.
I don't know about the
classroom, but she was very young. I've also read that Lucas wanted her to actually be younger, and this is another one of those, like when they were developing the thing, it was just like, yeah, no, she was 12. And it's like, whoa. But I think she was very much too young. Yeah. I think
she was roughly like 15 or something.
Whatever the math is.
Yeah.
You know, she was a child and she was in love and all of those things that she says. And his reaction to that was like, you knew what you were doing. Which
God, he's like, such a jerk. He makes me so mad in this scene. But I think that's why I like Marian so much, because I'm just like, oh my God, just kick him out of your bar already. I hate him so much. But despite the ick factor of it, I think that's kind of why I appreciate this first scene between them, because you get so much darkness out of it and so much resentment. Like she really, obviously they're still attracted to one another, but she's has total reason to hate him. Yeah.
They're starting out at odds too. And I think also it does a couple of things for me. It's one of the reasons why I think this movie, number one, the fact that Indy is at minimum a jerk. He's super flawed. Like there are no bones about it. He's a very flawed guy. In terms of the hero of our movie, he's kind of a jerk. He's jealous. He's a big baby about a lot of things. And so not only are we presented with the protagonist that is like very rough around the edges and very flawed, like number one, the other thing that it does is like, I don't mind seeing him getting punched in the face. You know, like part of Indy's appeal is that he's a guy that, you know, he always gets back up. Like he gets his ass kicked and he gets back up and he's often doing the adventure, but you can see the pain registers and we see him struggling and all of that stuff. We see him be afraid. Whereas like, I think part of the other side of this character, the part that would get into an inappropriate relationship with a girl that's way too young, he kind of deserves it. Like there's a weird amount of like, no, you should probably get your ass kicked a little bit. Like, this shouldn't be easy for you, you dick. Like that, it's that kind of, there's a little bit of that Marian and Indy's relationship kind of injects into watching him get his ass kicked for the rest of the movie. For me, anyway.
Well, I will say that no one gets their ass kicked quite like Harrison Ford. He's just so good at taking a hit and registering the pain, like you said. But it's also like what we see in this scene is consistent in regards to Indy's character. It's not that he doesn't care about Marian, but I feel like his mind is always on the artifact. And you see that, you know, later when we get to the desert and he kind of leaves her in the tent. But it just sets the stage for so many other things that happen throughout Raiders.
And again, toward the end, when he doesn't blow up the Ark, he can't bring himself to destroy the Ark because he just can't. And Belloc knows him better than anybody else. He knows that he's not going to do that. But so yeah, his first priority is he's an archaeologist, and everything else is kind of tied for second place. But I do, and also the rest of this scene. Any more to do with meeting Marian? Because the rest of the scene, the fight scene that follows, I think, is also really cool. In that, the one thing that I always love about it is that there is no John Williams. There is no music for it. Like it builds and builds and builds, and then it cuts out, which is always kind of when that works. Like it's when it, you know, I feel like a lot of action sequences will do that, where it's like the score goes away and all you hear is sounds of the car chase and that sort of thing. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But when it works, like it's a really fun effect.
It definitely, I feel like it makes it feel more serious, and that kind of builds. So after Indy leaves, you kind of see Marian kind of, you know, try to exert a little power in the situation. Like, this is my bar. Do you want some drinks? Blah, blah, blah. But it immediately established, like, it tells you kind of really quickly, like, oh, things are in danger. People could die. This is a serious situation. Yeah.
I think too, it's also just one extra layer of like the artifice of movies in general that is pulled away. So like if this was the first moment that we wanted to feel like Indy's actually in danger or that there's real stakes happening here, like in the opening sequence is like, no, this is this crazy temple and he's doing, you know, this is a sort of more outlandish adventure or whatever. Whereas this one is like, there's no music. So it's going to feel slightly more grounded. It's going to feel a little more stakesy. Either way, like I think it's great. All of a sudden, music cuts out and it's just gunfire.
I was just gonna say, there's also higher stakes here because this is the first gunfight, right? So like the opening scene doesn't have guns; it has like the natives, with their bows and arrows and spears, and now we're introduced to the Nazis and guns, and then like the bar catches on fire. There's the shootout. It's so much fun.
Good evening, Fräulein.
And Tot.
Yeah.
Tote. How are we going to say it?
Tot.
I think no.
Tot.
Oh, Tot.
Let's go with Tote.
I can roll.
Let's go exactly halfway in between. Tot. But he is an incredible villain. Like I love everything that he does in this movie.
He looks like a little evil Rick Moranis.
Yeah. And even and by the time we get to the end and he takes his hat off and he's got no hair, like it's so great.
Well, kind of
the scene in the desert where he pulls out the coat hanger that looks like a torture device, and then we realize that he's like, that to me is the whole movie. Like it's one of those. This is why I love Raiders of the Lost Ark, is because we think he's pulling out like some sort of weird torture device, but it's actually a coat hanger that he hands to one of his guys to put his jacket on. It's Perfect.
Well, also just so unsubtle, kind of to what we were saying earlier. He's just an over the top. I mean, he's a Nazi. He's a bad dude.
Yeah. I mean, this movie trades in archetypes like so thorough. Like some of these guys are just cartoons, you know, like they're broad strokes. Like we're not gonna be super, you know, Indy and Marian are the two sort of grayest characters in the movie. Like there's some subtlety and there's some sort of shiftiness to their dynamic where everybody else is just like good or evil, full stop.
I would argue too that Balak has some interesting layers. Like he's obviously not a great dude. He's stood by a lot of Nazi stuff happening. But yeah, everyone else is a cartoon. And there's so much of that in this movie where like it's cartoonish, but also dangerous, but also people are possibly dying, but also, you know, it's a little silly sometimes.
Yeah. What other moments we want to talk about, guys? Cal, you got one?
Yeah. Let's talk about let's talk about the once like they get into it, you know, and they're back in Tunis and the fight in the streets of Cairo. Cause that's like
I love that one.
That's like a multi-prong design fight. And the best part is like, what's so great about that scene too is not only like is it really well designed, but like the climax of it is serendipitous and not in the script.
Yeah, the high point of it. Yep.
Yeah. So when he's
shooting the swordsman,
when he shoots the swordsman, that was improv on the day because Harrison Ford was sick and he couldn't actually go through with the fight that they had choreographed.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he was too, he couldn't do anything physical. This is potentially a torf that I'm ruining, but everybody when they were shooting on location in Tunisia, like everybody except for Spielberg got massively sick because Spielberg was shipping he was eating like Chef Boyardee. It was all canned food that was shipped in from the UK. That's the only thing that he ate the whole time that they were shooting in Tunisia. And everybody else got massively ill. I couldn't help myself. I found some fun things that I actually filed under Torf in my notes here. So when we do get to Torf, I've got another fun one about that if we want to. We might have extra Torf today.
I don't think we blew any Torfs just now. But that is so funny that wasn't in the script because it really struck me as a great moment because there are so many moments like in a lot of action movies where it's like, just shoot him. Like, are we building up to a fight right now? It was like, and he heard me. It was like, oh, shoot him.
I think this moment has a lot to do with that. You know, like this is such an iconic, such a great moment that is just burned into our pop culture memories at this point. That I think a lot of frustration, like it sort of raised the bar for other, like now every movie has to have an insert of a guy getting a gun knocked out of his hand. So it's like, okay, well, now we know that it's just like as cell phones caused the problem for writers of just like, well, how am I going to strand these people with no way to contact the mainland? It's like, well, I got to make an excuse for their phones. Like we got to put a dialogue in there that says, well, I don't have any bars. What about you guys?
The storm knocked out the power.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's one of those, like we have to write to excuses now, you know, it's like, but the hell with it. Just set it in the 70s. I don't want to mess with cell phones.
The gun part is also nice too because he really sells it. Like there's that shrug, and he's like, and they pulls out
because it was so real. Like, it was 113 degrees in the desert, and he had diarrhea, and it was just like, I don't know if I can do this. And, like it's so funny.
Man, there was a lot of. Again, we shouldn't get too much into. There's a lot of roughness. They were in the desert. I read somewhere how much water they shipped to set. It's insane.
Yeah, it was tough, I'm sure, but I mean, again, like it's the same deal as Jaws. You know, there is the shark broke, and so you do it a different way, and that way wound up being better. You know, like it's one of those happy accidents that like it's easy to kind of be like, well, you know, the shark broke and he kind of accidentally gets credit for it, or Harrison Ford was sick and he accidentally gets credit for this being a cool scene. It's like, well, you got to be savvy enough to realize like the happy accidents when they show up, you know, you got to be able to say like, no, actually this is better. Or like, you got to be smart enough to say, well, how are we going to do it if the thing that we're, especially because he was in a hurry on this movie and he wasn't going to lose a day to let Harrison Ford get over, a stomach virus. So
the other thing about this scene too, it really makes you think Marian died, especially with the music cues. And honestly, I don't know how she didn't die. And I know we're not really supposed to think about it too hard, but it really seemed like she did. But if you didn't know any better, this is where it gets really high stakes. I mean, the what we think is the female lead just died. She didn't, but
yeah, it's one of those things that it doesn't really matter. Like if this movie is just not for you, if that's the kind of thing that you're worried about, it's one of those things. But I do want to, like, in terms of stuff that might be considered a lamp bump. This action sequence has a couple of them for me, because if we can just nerd out about maybe the most underappreciated person on any given film crew, particularly back in those days, the focus puller.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say the Nazi monkey.
Nope. The assistant camera, the guy on the camera team, whoever was pulling focus during this sequence, because there's a shot where he comes tearing around the corner into an extreme close-up of his eyes, and like nailing that focus is incredible. Then there's subsequently when the truck explodes, when Marian explodes, he comes running around a corner, truck explodes in the background, and Harrison Ford flips to camera and goes up against the wall, and we rack focus back to there. Like that he was like, okay, we're going to have a massive explosion on set. And also our main actor is going to run around a corner, and then on a dime, as the truck explodes, turn to camera. You're going to pull your focus about 75 feet, like from the explosion in the background to a close up of Harrison Ford in the foreground. And we're exploding a truck, so we can only do this once because we also have to hurry. Like that is the nailsiest ask for a crew that's also all sick in Tunisia in 114 degree heat. Like that you decided to cover that sequence that way is to me a bump of the lamp, because it's like you could have done this an easier way. Like you could have cut your crew a little bit of slack, but whoever that focus puller is incredible. I dug around and I don't know, obviously I don't know who it was, but through the credits, I picked a few names that it might have been. One of them, a guy named Robin Vigeon, was an assistant camera on Raiders. He went on to DP a bunch of movies, including The Fly 2 with our boy Chris Wallace.
Hey.
So I'm rooting for it to have been Robin Vigeon who pulled that incredible focus in that sequence and earned himself a lamp bump award for this episode.
He gets it. I'll give it to him.
Yeah.
Assuming it's him.
It might have been some other people. But I also imagine like Spielberg watching the dailies that night and that shot being soft.
Like, thank God.
And then that guy never working again.
Well, not to harp too much about Marian and Indy too, but this is also a great little character builder for them too, because actually you get one of my favorite little moments in the movie where it's like, it's a date, you eat it, and she's pretending that the monkey is their child, and just like a nice little bit of humor in addition to how great the stunts are, how well it's shot.
Do we want to talk just about like the art direction and stuff like that? Like, like when they get into like when they're trying to discover where the Ark is and the length of the staff, and because like they have to be there right when the sun goes down, and it's just like there's ways to just get people to where they need to go. And then they were just like, well, what happens if we have this room and then we're going to have a complete miniature. We're going to have a complete miniature of the city. And if you stand right here, we're going to just raise an arc light up slowly. So the light goes through and hits. I
love the way the sun moves in that scene. It's great.
I'm telling you, there's a lot of sun work in this movie. It's like Spielberg really thought about it.
For sure. Even like the shot where like they're just, it's like the foreman is walking across like the top is like the excavators are just like, hacking away in the sand, and the sun is like slowly coming down behind them. Like
those first couple of shots of them showing up in the desert, there's those long tracking shots with just hundreds of extras in the background and set deck all the way to the horizon. Like some of that desert stuff looks incredible. But I do also love that map
yeah.
room sequence because like it's also kind of a microcosm of everything else that they do in this movie, in that there are 3 different things happening that are stressful.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like I gotta get to the map room and I gotta find out where it is. They're digging in the wrong place, and then like it's while Indy's he's making the calculations, he's wiping sweat off his brow, he's doing all this stuff. Meanwhile, like Sala gets sidetracked by the Nazis, and he's got to regroup and figure out a different way to get Indy out of the hole. And like every little thing in this movie, there are 4 things going on that are going to cause problems. Maybe it's just crazy. Which, by the way, Sala, one of the all-time great sidekicks.
Oh, fantastic. John Rhys Davies.
Yeah.
I don't think we've talked about him yet. No, he's just the perfect amount of friendly, but also like, I feel like you could see that he has his own agenda. No, perfect.
Yeah, he's great. He's also he's there's a wisdom to him that's really great. Anyway.
If it is there, Tanis, then it is something that man was not meant to disturb. Death has always surrounded it.
We got to talk about the truck chase.
Oh my
Once
God,
the Ark is loaded onto the truck, that to me, this is one of the reasons why I love this movie, because that is one of the most exciting, largely practical car chases just ever. I think
it's completely practical.
There's a couple of, the car driving off the cliff that shows up all of a sudden. There's a couple of things that are sort of painted in, but yeah, I mean, guys, literally, there's a little bit of everything from that matte painting of a car driving off a cliff to a guy falling off the side of the truck and the footage being sped up just a little bit to like it's one of these like great moments in film where there's like every old trick in the book is in this sequence, and there's also a couple of new ones, Also,
I should have looked this up. Was that Harrison doing all the stunts? Because it looked a lot like Harrison. Or was it a double?
I think there's some that's him, but his stunt double very famously looks just like him.
Because you can't tell.
Talk about job
It
security.
looks like Harrison doing it all.
Yeah, Vic Armstrong is his name. Apparently, at one point Harrison Ford once told Vic, he's like, "If you ever learn to act, I'm in trouble," because he looks just like him.
No, a great scene. We haven't talked about the snake pit, I don't think, either.
The Well of the Souls, yeah.
The Well of the Souls.
I mean, it's hard to talk about this movie without talking about the entire movie. We should have just done a watch along. It's because, I mean, so many snakes, just snakes all over the place. And that's another great example of let's make this last as long as we possibly can. Because it is a slow moving scene. But it's tense the whole time, because meanwhile, also we keep cutting back to the tent where Belloc and Marian are getting drunk, and she's thinking about trying to escape. But that sequence takes forever, and it's tense from start to finish.
And it's also, you touch on the great like clothes hanger thing that Tot does, but I think that's where the tent scene is where you really get to know Belloc, and that he's you never quite know if he's pretending to be a gentleman, but I think he has a genuine affection for Marian. And that's why I think he's one of the, I would say, better indie villains, because he's not just a cartoonish. He's not like Tot, where he's just cartoonish and yeah.
I think in his way, he has an affection, but it's not a
pure
because
affection.
ultimately he's not all that broken up when she gets tossed down into the Well of Souls with Indy. He's like, this was not plan A. Sorry.
Yeah. But I think he genuinely enjoys her company in a way.
Yeah. For his part.
Yeah.
I do think their escape from the Well of Souls is also funny. It's one of those things that it happens every now and then in movies where by the time they get out of there, he just shoves one rock kind of out of the way and then they climb out. He has to break through. He has to break through a wall, and there's a bunch of terrifying skeletons and all of that stuff. But like ultimately, it's just like he's shoving part of a wall that's already been excavated out of the way, and that's how they get out. Which is just like, you guys were so close to the Well of the Souls. It's not terribly hidden at this point. So
Yeah, I mean, like the entrance to the an entrance to the Well of Souls is just like right at the end of the runway.
Also, just right around the corner next to the plane. Yeah,
yeah. And also, like, how light is that rock? That one man can just like shove this like huge stone out of the way, and be like, bloop. And
there's also a wide shot of them climbing out of that rock where you can see a guy. It's either like a guy asleep, like right underneath where they're crawling out, or like maybe there's a deleted scene where he had to punch the guy or something like that. He's unconscious or something like that. But there's a dude just on the ground next to where they're climbing out of the Well of Souls, which is just like, I don't know if it's just a guy on break or something. Like, the point is, like, they do the same thing in Fellowship of the Ring, right? When they're after Gandalf falls fighting the Balrog, they just walk up a flight of steps and then they're out. it's like, okay. Anyway, let's go straight to, listen, there's so much to this movie that's incredible, but let's go straight to the Wrath of, oh yeah, go ahead.
I really like that plane fight with Pat Roach, and
yes,
he looks so psyched to wail on Indy. And at this point, again, to this kind of point of him being exhausted, you just feel like Harrison's getting his ass beat.
I like the 1 second. The 1 second where he's just like, he's on the plane. He's just like, I'm coming. Just give me a second.
Yeah. It's like, I know we have to do this, but I'll be right there. Hang on. Yeah, no, that's good. And I'm glad you said Pat Roach. I had Pat Roach in my notes too. He's such a part of the Indiana Jones franchise too. Like we've already seen him once in this movie. He was one of the thugs in the bar, in Marian's bar. He was like the big dude. And then he's, the big thuggy guy in Temple of Doom as well. But yeah, he was also in A Clockwork Orange. Like, he was in A Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon. He worked with Stanley Kubrick before he did either of these. So it's kind of fascinating. But can we move ahead to the Wrath of God sequence?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Because this is so cool. And I think, and Cal, last year you did an incredible art of the scene on this whole, like, we got to talk to a whole bunch of the main players. We talked to Joe Johnston and to Richard Edlund, and it's a really cool piece. But like, this scene is worth talking about over and over again.
Yeah, of course, because it's incredible. There's so much done, right? Like, I mean, I've spent so much time focusing on the face melting part of it, but there's so much more to it than the face melting part of it. And like, cause even like the way that they used, like, they had to strap like lights to the chests of the Nazis so they could get that, like, the chain link effect, of the lightning. And then they had to make like clay molds of the apparitions and then do like double photography to get all that stuff to work, and like optical printing, all of that. Like,
they had models swimming in tanks to be the ghosts and filming them that way, and then having them swim in reverse so that their hair was flowing different ways. And like, everything they did about this scene was incredible.
I also love it. No, I just love that,
Alex.
There's only 3 dudes that get their faces melted, and the others are just taken out quick by lightning. But it's like, no, something special for you guys.
Well, they all get their own special death, right? One of them like implodes, one of them explodes, and then there's the face melting. But because they were the 3 proper antagonists, right, of this movie. Like, they all needed their own special way to die to feel good about the end of this movie,
Yeah, you couldn't just like strike them with lightning like all the other Nazis. No, you needed to draw it out.
Yeah.
Also, the face melting is so cool, and they put so much time into that. Like, just building all of those like wax faces just to like sit there with a propane heater and just like let it melt for like hours.
Yeah, so it was Chris Wallace who also actually invented a new kind of wax material, like a type of like dental paste or something like that, right? Which was like, they built a model of Toth's head, and then they built layers underneath it of all this different stuff that could melt in different ways and with different viscosities. And they put like string in between the layers so it looked like veins and muscles and stuff like that. And then they just sat there for what did it take? Like 10, 11 minutes, something like that, to just blast this thing with heat until it all melted. And then they speed ramped it up to where it happens in, seconds.
Seconds.
Yeah.
Spielberg's favorite shot in the movie. In a movie that has so many amazing shots, that's his favorite one.
And rightfully so, because it's, there's also the great sort of kind of real world context to that scene where nobody on set knew what was going to happen. Like they shot all of that stuff going like, yeah, it's scary. Be scared. And like, that was it. They didn't know really anything else about how it was going to look until it was done. Like until they shot the VFX plates and stuff like that. And even the VFX plate, like the sky opening up, that cloud that kind of bubbles open at the top.
That's all oils in like a tank, right?
Yeah. And it was an accident too, because somebody stepped on a hose. They stepped on a hose and it backed up and then squirted a bunch all at once. And that's what caused the bubble to kind of open. And Richard Edlund has this great quote. I think it was a quote in our piece too. He was just like, I saw that happen. I was like, oh, yeah, there it is. which is another one of those things about this era of filmmaking of just like, there's so much talent and so much preparation that goes into all of this stuff because you have to get it in camera. Right. And then there's the talent and the confidence to set out to do that thing. But then there's also like the self-awareness and the wherewithal to recognize a happy accident, when it happens. Because like I got a buddy of mine, he made this joke a long time ago that I think about all the time. He's like, filmmaking is against God, which is like all of this effort and all of the, all of the lighting and all of the editing and all of the everything that goes into giant, massive crews that you had, the sets you have to build to make something that just looks natural is like an affront to the universe in a lot of ways. So like, if you can't like wholeheartedly embrace those happy accidents, like when something goes wrong and it actually turns out to be in your favor, like then you're doing it wrong, And so I feel like you look at Jaws with the shark, you look at this movie, you look at Harrison Ford's diarrhea, giving us one of the most iconic scenes of all time. Like that's what this era of filmmaking to me is about. It's about a bunch of genuinely brilliant people getting lucky on top of everything else, and it's so much fun when that stuff happens.
Also, like not for nothing, they're also not getting like blank checks either, right? Like you look at today's Indiana Jones, and that movie costs so much money, so it costs so much money that they can't afford to take any risks, and that was the exact problem with that film. Yeah.
Well, and because meanwhile Spielberg needed this to be on budget. Like that's the thing that. Watching this movie and seeing, because there's some spots where it's like, well, that take was a little wooden, like there's some stuff where some of the action, some of the fight choreography is like very posed, like especially the shot that I'm thinking of in particular is when he jumps out of the way of the sword and the bad guy stabs another bad guy, and then the next cut he's pulling lemons out from behind him, which is funny. But it's very staged and could have been much. There's a version of that that's a little smoother, but we don't have time. We did it. Go. And also to the Wrath of God sequence, like he spent a whole day setting up the blocking of it, and he blew a whole day, and then they couldn't afford to, so they could only shoot the wide shots. Like they only had time to shoot the wide shots on set of that whole Wrath of God sequence, and all the close-ups they had to do an ILM like months later because he ran out of time and he couldn't bring this movie in over budget.
Well, yeah,
Which
I have to wonder how much
Spielberg under pressure of just like, I might not get to make another movie if I fuck this up. Like that's not a version of Steven Spielberg that we're accustomed to seeing or that we even think about existing in the first place. Right. But that's what it was on Indiana Jones, which is
that was the last time that existed to think about. Too.
Yeah, it hasn't made sense, but.
Well, also, I would like to note that this actually, I always forget that it doesn't end exactly after the Wrath of God scene, but it ends with the U.S. government getting hands on the Ark, which is a really interesting choice because that doesn't feel like a happy ending to me. It feels like really Indy should have been against any government body having the Ark, but
Well, that was the plan, right? Like, the museum gets it after we're done. And yes, true. Of course. But I think, again, and, to just crate it up and wheel it off into that warehouse, that incredible matte painting of a warehouse, is such a fun and fitting ending for the whole thing. Yeah.
And it actually makes it feel real safe too, that we don't have to worry about that. Cause it's such a great matte painting that like even the government doesn't know what it has.
Yes. Yeah. But they know well enough to put it away forever.
Yeah,
like it's gone. It's like also misfiling something in a, it's like if you
such a great scene. It's also been a lot of good memes made with that scene recently.
That's true. We only briefly mentioned the it's not the years, it's the mileage line. But my favorite, I would say that's my favorite line in the movie.
It's not the years, it's the mileage.
Yep, that's a good one. It's second place to my favorite line in the movie, which is, I don't know, I'm making all this up as I go.
I don't know, I'm making this up as I go.
Yeah, that's
also a good one.
That's
also a good one.
That's so, both of those lines are so indie, they're like that. That's, you don't need much more information about who he is at that point. But that's such a, even just Sala going like, I'm going to get on that truck and get to the thing. But how? I don't know. It's great. It's also such a wonderful little screenplay hack too. It's like, what else are you going to say at this point? Like, I'm not going to talk about how,
Speaking of Sala, there's one line after we think Marian's dead where Indy's like, well, Marian died. And he says something along the lines of like, well, yeah, you move on. It's like,
I know,
she died like
but life
30
goes
minutes
on.
ago, Sala.
Yeah.
My God, savage.
Those kids coming in to rescue him. That's another scene that we didn't talk to. I think I actually alluded to this scene in a previous episode in terms of like camera blocking. But the scene where he's talking to Belloc in that little bar after Marian dies, and the whole thing is shot with Harrison Ford out of focus in the foreground in profile, and then Belloc in the background in focus, and their conversation happens. There's no focus pulling or anything like that. It's all on Belloc, and Harrison Ford is sort of in the foreground, kind of obscured. But it's all one long take for the most part. It cuts finally at the end of it, I think, when it cuts back around to Harrison Ford. But like that staging where we're just over a shoulder and we just linger on that shot throughout the conversation is there's something really, I don't know how I feel about it. There's something that's really uncomfortable about that scene, and like it kind of, it's a great scene. I love the way that it works, but just there's a slowness to it because like it's like they're leaving air for the edit in between their lines. Like the cues are not tight at all between the lines, and anyway, it's just a fun way to watch a conversation that you don't get a whole lot. Yeah. And I can't remember what movie we were talking about when I brought this scene up, but I think about this scene all the time. Anytime I see anything like that, where it's like one person's out of focus, but in profile, and then the other person is the focus of the shot. But
I mean, it's not entirely uncommon
for that framing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on to movie lists. Shall we? Is there any other, again, like throw a dart at this movie and we can talk for an hour about whatever we hit, because it's so cool. But I mentioned a couple art of the scenes that we've done. We did one on the boulder scene. Obviously, that was like 8 years ago or something like that. We did the one Cal did last year on the face melting, the Wrath of God sequence.
Yeah. It was a run. Go on, sorry.
No, we did things you didn't know about Indiana Jones, a couple homemade movies kind of things. It is on top 10 character introductions of all time.
As it should be.
Runner up on
Indiana Jones is a one of the top 10 heroes, which I'm not sure if he made the update or not. I think he was on the original top 10 heroes, and then
he got bumped.
I think he got bumped. Well, because I rearranged you know how it is in
categories.
Like,
yeah,
I rearranged some of the categories, and I don't think he had quite the same home that he used to. Or I might have done one of those things where I'm like, the obvious choice is Indiana Jones, but instead I'm picking this more obscure one. he showed up on Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, showed up on top 10 hyper specific subgenres, which was actually my personal top 10. When we got to our 100th episode, Billy and I both did our personal top 10s. And it showed up on mine because when I was a kid, I saw Jaws and I loved sharks and I wanted to be an oceanologist, sharkologist. Neither of those are real words. Then I
Marine biologist.
Then I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark and I wanted to be an archaeologist. Then I saw Jurassic Park and I wanted to be a paleontologist. Then I discovered the same guy made all three of those movies. And that's what made me want to get into movies. Was that sort of realization that it was like, oh, wow, look at that. So all three of those movies are tied for some of my favorites of all time. Indy's Whip was on top 10 movie props of all time. And then it's gotten honorable mentions in screenplays, action movies, at least. There's bound to be more honorable mentions. Point is, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a well-covered film on CineFix. Have we missed anything? Is there anything that
honorable
it needs to show up on?
It was an honorable mention in the body horror section of practical effects.
Yep.
Oh, because the face
melting got a shout out.
Yeah.
Do we have a best score list?
We have, honestly,
probably not.
That'd be a tough one.
We've danced around some of the musical ones. We've done like top 10 musical moments. We've done soundtracks. It's tough to do those on YouTube.
I was just gonna say, thanks YouTube and your content ID.
Yeah. It's tough to do those, and
didn't think about that.
They're still monetizable. But scores, I don't think we've done one that was just straight up scores. We've done several musical episodes. I could be misremembering that though.
I just feel like even in the grand scheme of John Williams, it's just top tier music cues.
Yeah, we should do one that's just composers.
Yeah, that's honestly a good idea.
There's enough.
I mean, there's John Williams and then there's everybody else.
Yeah, I'm only saying that because John Williams would be his own category.
We could just do a John Williams list, honestly.
We did do film scores.
Oh.
We did do film scores. So let me see.
Curious to see how you guys did it.
See. Empire Strikes Back is the John Williams pick on that, it looks like.
I'm not mad about it.
Yeah. Anyway. Probably room for more. Did we do it though? Have we done justice to Raiders of the Lost Ark where movie lists are concerned?
I think so.
Yeah.
Have we ever done do we have a best adventure movie, or do we not go that generic?
Well, it was the pick in action movies, or that's where it got its honorable mention, was in the action adventure section of action movies. I don't know that we could blow out adventure into enough subgenres to do a proper movie list. We might be able to. But that's where it was in our action movie lists.
I'm just glad it was on character intros because, again, this one has two very good ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's we only dealt with the first one. But Marian's was like, I agree. I think it's just as good as his.
Yeah.
Well, we can move on to Torf then, because I feel like all the clear movie lists are well covered. Let's move on to some things you didn't know. And Alex, do you have some Torf for us? Some true or false? Believe
it or not, I feel like there are some fun facts that we haven't discussed yet. So let's move on to those.
I've got a few extra. You want to take turns? We'll alternate.
Yeah, let's take turns.
Or should I just wait until you're done and then see if I'm stepping on your toes?
Let's do that. Because I feel like also, for as much as you know about this movie, you'll probably know all of these. But, we'll see. See if me and Tyos...
I've got 3, so...
I've got 4. Okay. Let's see. True or false? Danny DeVito was originally cast to play Sala, but he had to drop out due to conflicts with Taxi. True or false?
I'm going to say false. I'm going to say this is a Tayo false. This is a Tayo Alex half falsy. I don't know that he was officially cast. I know he was the first choice.
Well, Tayo and I are officially in your heads.
I'll go. Is it that half false? Because he was the pick. It was going to be Tom Selleck and Danny DeVito for a hot minute, but I don't know that they both had contractual obligations that kept them out of it. So
TV kept him out of the big picture.
Taxi. It was Magnum PI and Taxi that kept us from
Taxi rips.
Yeah, honestly, Danny DeVito sticking around for Taxi, I think we're all better off for it.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. Yeah, he was originally written as a Sam Jaffe or Gun Gadin type, almost a small character from the Star Wars Cantina. He initially offered the role to DeVito, but he had to drop out due to a scheduling conflict with Taxi. I think we're all better for it. I totally see the idea of casting DeVito. Like, I see it and I get it, but it's not as good. It would have been fine.
I can't see like New Jersey Danny DeVito as a Nazi.
No, as Sala. He was going to be Sala.
He was going to be Sala. Okay.
Yeah, which I get. Oh, did you think he was going to be Belloc? Which would be really
oh, no. Oh, God, no.
No, Sala, I do get. Like, I kind of understand this inclination to kind of go for this, like,
it's
almost
a choice.
kind of, yeah.
It would have been it would have been a different version than like the very regal John Rhys Davies, but I see the choice. And it would have been different. And I'm glad that it didn't work out.
Yeah. And as Tayo notes, Rhys Davies is over a foot taller than DeVito. So physically very different. All right. Yeah. So that one was
Which is funny that he's a dwarf in Lord of the Rings and shorter than everybody else. Even though he was he's like 6'5" or something like that.
That is a fun bit of irony. Okay. True or false? At age 15, Michael Bay worked on Raiders and thought it would, quote unquote, suck.
Ooh. I think true that 15-year-old Michael Bay would have thought that.
Was it Michael Bay? I remember there's somebody that was a director that worked in like the press for Lucasfilm and was just like taking calls.
I'm going to go false just because I think you're leaning true, Cal.
Yeah, I'm going to lean true.
I have no idea on this one, so I'm guessing false.
It is true, and I kind of love that it's true. He said in an interview with EW, when I was 15, I worked at Lucasfilm. He was an intern, and I filed your Raiders of the Lost Ark storyboards. I saw the entire movie in storyboard form, and I honestly thought it was gonna suck.
Thank you, Michael Bay.
But it did help him realize that he wanted to get into movies. He said, when I went to Gauman's Chinese Theater with my parents and saw it, I went, oh my God, I've got to do this. I don't know. He's always been nice to me. So...
Well, yeah, he gave him goddamn Transformers.
Yeah. I do like that Michael Bay was like, oh man, this is going to blow.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. All right. True or false? During the scene where Indiana threatens the Nazis with a Panzerfaust, which that's like the kind of tube thing, actor Paul Freeman swallows a fly. True or false? We don't talk much about those things.
True.
Yeah. Sure. It disappears right there on camera. It's crawling along his face and then goes straight into his mouth.
All right. That's actually false. It looks like it. It looks significantly like he swallowed it. No, contrary to popular belief, he did not swallow it. Freeman explained in an interview years later that the fly flew off at about the instant he uttered the word bad, but Spielberg noticed it and decided it would be funny to cut out a few frames so the fly would not be seen flying away. This made it look as though Freeman ate it, and he found the edit highly amusing. So you were meant to think he swallowed it, to be fair.
And that's another thing that just shows what Spielberg's priorities were on this film, right? Like that he's like, I don't know, it'd be funny if he looks like he swallows it. Let's just leave it.
No, but it's funny because that even struck me watching it too. Because I also, before Tayo pulled these facts together, I was like, oh yeah, he totally just swallowed that fly.
No, it works. Yeah, no, the fly's just here and then it's gone, and then
Yeah, he just doesn't care. He's that focused. All right. One last of my torfs, and then we'll move on to your torfs, Clint. In an interview with GQ, Harrison Ford described seeing Indiana Jones's costume as the moment he knew the film was for him. True or false?
Ooh.
I'll go true on that.
Yeah, I think also true.
False.
Didn't like it.
So he had questions. So he said that his quote was, "My questions about it were many. Why am I wearing a leather jacket in the jungle? Isn't it hot here? Why am I carrying a whip? What am I going to do with an effing whip? I'm going to whip people." It was explained to Ford by Lucas and Spielberg that the outfit was an evocation of a time and reflection of movies past. That was all Ford needed to hear. So he didn't like the costume at first. That
very much feels like Harrison Ford being like, what is this?
What am I going to do with a freaking whip?
Yeah. Hey, why am I walking next to this walking carpet?
The leather jacket in the jungle is a good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't into it.
I got a couple. Here's a fun one. Torf. The sound of the boulder rolling in the opening sequence was actually the sound of the tires of Ben Burtt's Honda Civic driving across the rough shoulder of the PCH.
Say that one more time.
The sound of the boulder rolling in the opening sequence was actually the sound of Ben Burtt's Honda Civic tires rolling across the shoulder of the PCH.
Okay, I feel...
I'm going to go...
The Pacific Coast Highway, I'm sorry.
I'm going to go with true. I do know that the closing of the Ark was his toilet.
I didn't know that. That's very good.
Yeah. So. Some of them got reused from Star Wars, too. There was some, like... Ben Burtt... We haven't talked about Ben Burtt sound designing this film at all, but...
I mean, that guy's Mona Lisa is like the Star Wars stuff. He's... The sound of a lightsaber, the TIE fighter, all those things. This is all just like, more naturalistic than Galaxy Far.
So
Far
was
Away.
it his Honda Civic?
I'm gonna go with true. Yes, yeah. Unless you're gonna tell me it was actually it was his Ford Galaxy.
Well, that's why it's tuffing on the other side, or it wasn't on the PCH, right? But it was like on the side streets, man. It's tuffing on the other side. Gosh, but what if I'm trying to think of exactly how it sounds. What if it's not even a car? I'm gonna go. I'll go true.
It's true. Apparently they were rolling like rocks down actual cliffs in like the Santa Monica Canyon or something like that. He was driving home, and as he pulled onto the PCH, he was like, "Oh, wait, there it is."
That's convenient.
Also, the sequence, this is a bonus thing you didn't know. The sequence was more or less lifted straight from a Scrooge McDuck comic book called The Seven Cities of Cibola that George Lucas really liked. So the boulder and everything, even the idol looks kind of like the idol from them. But so we've talked about everybody getting food poisoning on set. So the Torf with that, in addition to it giving us the great Indian swordsman shooting scene, the food poisoning combined with the high temperatures in Tunisia, there was a moment on set where John Rhys-Davies just straight up shit his pants in front of everybody.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I
can confirm that's true. Yeah, no, it's true.
I was there.
I saw it happen. That's just a really unfortunate moment. Apparently, it happened in a scene that didn't even make the movie. It was a deleted scene. They were filming, and he just doubled over and shat himself, which is just how it was shooting while sick in the desert.
That's like so much of a shoot sounds terrible.
Yeah, right.
Just miserable. Right? Everyone's sick and stinky. It's terrible. And hot.
Sick and stinky is the worst way to be. So last one, the actor who voiced the Nazi monkey, went on to become the third highest grossing actor of all time. True or false?
I feel like I'm supposed to say false because that sounds really outlandish, but voice actors, I'm going to say false.
The voice actor?
The actor who did the monkey sounds, the monkey voice of the Nazi monkey, would go on to become the third highest grossing actor of all time.
Like actor, not voice actor.
Actor.
True. Let's go with true.
I'm going to go false.
You're still going false? It's true.
Mm-hmm. What? That's crazy.
The same actor voiced Abu in Aladdin, voiced Megatron. It's Frank Welker, Scooby-Doo.
Oh.
And if you total everything, cameos, voiceover, Like there's the one layer of like the top grossing actors of all time, and it's just everybody that was in Endgame at this point. But then if you total up everything from voiceover to cameos to like uncredited work and things like that, Frank Welker is the third highest grossing actor of all time. Because he did Megatron in the Transformers movies. He's done Scooby-Doo forever. He did Abu and Aladdin. He was in Raiders.
Well, like
Welker.
you said, like you've got to respect that because it's kind of like you could just get one big paycheck from Endgame, but no, he worked for that. I like that he's got that much.
He's got 700 credits or something. It's like a volume play for him.
Good for Frank.
Yeah, way to go, Frank.
Yeah.
That monkey, the third highest grossing actor of all time. Let's move on to
That
MVP.
is a
Who's the
really
MVP
fun
of this
fact.
movie?
Harrison Ford, without question.
Harrison Ford?
Yeah.
We all might have different ones.
Oh.
I won't argue too much with Harrison Ford, but I wouldn't say without question. I got to go with Spielberg.
Really?
I'm going to go John Williams.
Whoa.
Wow.
Have we
all
ever
have
had three different
ones.
answers?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Like this is like another notch in the belt of like Spielberg greats, but this is the moment that like Harrison Ford managed to transcend Star Wars and become like Harrison Ford, like
he wasn't Han Solo anymore.
Yeah, he wasn't Han Solo anymore. He could do anything now.
Right. No, I don't disagree with that at all for Harrison Ford's career. I think for this movie in particular, like Spielberg, I think I mentioned it earlier with John Williams winning Academy Awards. Like Spielberg, if it's a Spielberg movie, there's like he's the default MVP unless somebody really jumps up and takes it from him, you know. But I do think that
Like Harrison Ford.
like the position that Spielberg was in to start with this movie, that like he decided he's like, I'm going to make this a lean, on budget, on time movie. So he kind of gave himself that limitation. I think also the way that he turned things over, like the stack of temp storyboards that he just handed Richard Edlund to say, like, you got to make something good out of this. And like I keep talking about this era of filmmaking being like a combination of like talent and ingenuity along with like dumb luck. Like the fact that there's something too surrounding himself with really talented people and trusting them and like cobbling all of that together to make an incredible movie. Like this one, I wouldn't give Spielberg that kind of credit for many other of his movies, honestly. Like, but this one feels like he really tied it all together.
I just don't think. Go
ahead.
I was just gonna say I can't imagine anybody else ever being Indiana.
Like if it had been Tom Selleck,
yeah,
we wouldn't be talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Might not. No.
Yeah. To my point, yep. Thinking about what this movie wouldn't work without, to me, the score it does so much of the heavy lifting, like just kind of tell it, like being cartoonish when it needs to be, serious when it needs to be, this very, very specific themes for each and every character and moment. I just can't imagine this movie without the John Williams score.
The fact that my 8-year-old knows that's a bad guy.
Exactly.
That's all John Williams.
Yeah. Wow. A standoff.
No, but honestly, I'm giving it to whoever was pulling focus in that street fight scene.
I'm giving it to Frank Welker, honestly.
Give it to Frank Welker. Yeah, there's no way we're gonna land on one of those. I think they're all tied, frankly, because I get your point, Cal. Like this isn't the same movie with a different indie.
Listen, I respect it. I respect that it takes a village kind of attitude, but at the end of the day, like Harrison Ford couldn't rely on anybody else to figure out Indiana Jones. Like,
yep. Yeah,
I also
honestly,
do appreciate that
you might have gotten me.
I think it's the most fun that Harrison has. Like I love this role for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember years ago somebody asked him if he would ever be Han Solo again, and he was like, nah. He's like, what about Indiana Jones? He's like, in a heartbeat. Like,
he ended up playing or Han Solo 2 more times after that.
Yeah, no, he ended up cashing a lot more checks since he said that. I think this was in 1998 when somebody asked him that. But.
Not the man I knew 10 years ago.
It's not the years, it's the mileage.
We've gone way over, but we always have time for this last segment, Calibro.
who is Nicolas Cage playing in a Raiders of the Lost Ark movie?
Where are you swapping him in?
Well, he already played an Indiana Jones-esque character in National Treasure, and let's just call that far inferior to the OG Indiana Jones.
I'm a National Treasure defender, but yeah, no, it's not in the same conversation.
No. I want to see him be a deranged Belloc. I think how Nicolas Cage would contribute to this role is a good heel turn.
Yeah, I had Belloc or Todd.
Todd is who I had. We're all thinking around the same lines. Yeah. Just Belloc is interesting,
let those villains. Yeah, I like that Belloc is kind of a collected. Like he's kind of a cool energy that I think if you turn, Cage could have that for sure. But like, if we're thinking about turning Nicolas Cage loose on one of these roles, like, I don't think we would get that, but like him as Tot, like who's already a cartoon, as we've discussed, I think would be additionally weird and creepy and memorable.
Yeah. I don't know. I think he's too handsome.
He's too handsome?
For Tot, yeah, because like he's like the gross repugnant Nazi,
A little makeup will take care of that, though.
Exactly, like Nick Cage is, he's a handsome dude, but he's been unhandsome before.
Yeah, but
he's been not handsome.
I just
think the same movie, actually.
I just think the Belloc part of it, he could just bring a little bit more of a more disturbed and unhinged thing to Belloc, and have like that like charm and class, but be a little, this guy, there's something up with this dude, just make it a little more fuzzy. Can't quite put your finger on it.
I think that tips the hand. That blurs the line between him and the Nazis a little too much, I think. But Todd, for sure.
Yeah,
is that who you were going with, Alex?
Yeah, sometimes with this segment, I struggle like a little bit in thinking like, is it actually better with Cage? I think he would make a great Todd. I think this, not that Ronald Lacey didn't do a great job, but I think it would be so cartoonish and fun just to see him like go nuts with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would have been a blast. That's who I'm going with.
Yeah. You're sticking with Belloc? I don't hate it. I think it's an interesting choice.
Agree to disagree. Because I think Belloc is like a real good Castor Troy kind of role that I don't like his Castor Troy on the plane in the beginning of Face Off is, I think, like where his Belloc would come from, and I just think that is more of a Belloc than it is a Tot.
I can't see Belloc saying, "If I were to let you suck my tongue," like that's a different Belloc that I don't want to be a part of. Like I like where Belloc's at.
That's kind of where I don't know if he would be better than Paul Freeman. That's kind of the question I bring myself to. And I don't think he would be. I think Freeman did a great job. He's a great Belloc.
So you think Paul Freeman is a better Belloc than
Castor Troy? Yes.
Than Ronald Lacey is of Tot.
I think Ronald Lacey's a great Tot. I just think Nick Cage could do it as well.
Because like the whole point here is that we have to shoehorn Nick Cage in here somewhere. So then that becomes the argument of, you think that,
you know what? Here's what I think. I think we're losing more by losing Paul Freeman as Belloc.
Yeah, I'll say it in a different but equally political way. I think the energy that Ronald Lacey gives us as Tot is more replaceable than what we get out of Paul Freeman.
Okay.
Paul Freeman.
I agree.
I think Paul Freeman is very specifically Belloc, and Ronald Lacey is very specifically scary guy, which I think we can get a different type of scary guy and still and not miss a beat. Whereas a different type of Belloc changes this movie dramatically. Mm-hmm. That's my. You're
sticking with Belloc, Cal.
I'm with it. I think we could creep him up a little bit. I don't think it's. I think it's a different movie, but I don't think it's a bad one.
See, I think it's not bad, but I think it's worse. I don't think it's better.
Yeah, it's worse. I agree.
Agree to disagree.
Whereas him as Todd is as good or better.
There's plenty of room between Raiders of the Lost Ark and bad, and like it'll exist in there somewhere. But All right. Where is it on your list, guys?
It's not on mine. Sorry to say.
It is not on your list.
No. Like I said, it
not on yours
was
either,
not,
Cal.
I went.
That's surprising.
I had room on my list for one Indiana Jones film, and I went Last Crusade.
Okay. So you and your rules about one of each.
Yeah, I mean, listen.
It was the same deal with Cronenberg.
It was. Is Raiders of the Lost Ark a better film? Probably, but I just have
Last Crusade.
Yeah, but I just have a real soft spot for the Last Crusade. So
okay,
the Last Crusade.
For what it's worth, I don't think Last Crusade is on my list actually, but I do prefer Last Crusade as a personal preference. I just think it has a stronger emotional core.
You're completely indie list on your list.
I think I'm indie. Yeah, I'm an indie list. It's not a frit.
Did you put Crystal Skull on your list?
What if I did? That's the one.
I would start. You and Dan are going to get no thanks at the end of every episode if you put Crystal.
The funny thing is, like, I actually kind of enjoy Temple of Doom, which no one else does, but it entertains me. But like, I'll defend that a little bit. But no indie on my list.
No indie on your list. Well, yeah. I'm told that Dan didn't have it on his list either. So this is just a solo Clint joint ending up on the list.
Which means it's real high on Clint's list.
With zero shame whatsoever, have this at number 2.
All right.
Whoa. That's a big one. It is
my second favorite movie of all time. According to my list.
So wait a second here.
Yeah, well,
this movie is technically worse than Independence Day?
No, Independence Day I had lower than this. Independence Day in the teens somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
No, this is number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Wait, Cal, wasn't Sunset Boulevard your number 2? Or is it your number 1?
No, it's not my number 1. It's in my top 5. Let me look up.
Because I remember it being very high up. I wonder if we have 2 2s now.
Do we have 2 solo 2s? And this is just us investigating Dan's algorithm at this point.
Yeah, it's not about the movie at all.
It's not about the movie at all. But
Sunset Boulevard is my number 2. So yeah, we have 2 2s. Yeah.
So and then Sunset Boulevard ended up. Where did Sunset Boulevard end up on our list?
Ooh,
this is
question. Fun. Wait, what does that mean about the how does it get the edge?
Oh, you know what? This is with the benefit of a producer being in my ear and not yours. Sunset Boulevard was actually also on Dan's list, so it was ranked a little higher. So it wasn't a solo number 2. But this being a solo number 2, do you have the envelope again, Cal?
I do. It's not an envelope, though. It's this huge box. Excuse me. Don't want to bump the mic, Tayo. Oh, I did. I just did. I just bumped the mic. Okay, so here we go.
You get a treasure chest, an actual Ark of the Covenant.
Tayo's getting more advanced with these.
I don't have.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, and it's on the idol.
We got the idol.
Hey.
Wait, this is so fun.
We got the idol.
This stuff you can find at the IGN office if you look.
I mean, the irony. The irony is this probably came from Amazon. It was probably sitting in an exact warehouse that was exactly like where the Lost Ark is.
Yeah.
All right, hold on.
And Francis McDormand had to go track it down for you.
All right, so here we go. This idol, great, amazing. Ooh, it's even sealed with wax.
Wax?
My God. Now I am wondering if we just had all this stuff in the office.
Tayo's great, but I don't see him going shopping for another.
All right, so if you guys had a guess, where is it?
I think it's top 50. A 2 is strong.
A 2 is strong, and if there's any sense at all to Dan's algorithm, it ought to be in the top 50. But I'm going to go just because you went top 50. I'm going to go just outside the top 50, somewhere in the 50 to 60 range.
Price is right. This highest or closest without going over. Give me a number.
Which one is over? Is closer to 1 over or
no higher? So
the higher actual number.
Yeah.
I'm going to go
53.
Higher than 40. Oh, okay.
53?
I'm going to 40. I'm going to say 40.
Clint is right. This is the 65th.
65.
65th.
Number 2 on one of our lists gets you to number 65. I don't know what that says.
Not as strong as I thought.
Yeah. Okay. You get docked lots of points for not showing up on lists, I guess.
On Dan's list, I think.
I think you didn't have it on his, so he's like, whatever. This is way lower than Sunset Boulevard. Well, guys, that's going to do it for us then. Thank you for talking about a movie that only I think is cool, I guess. Number 2.
Yeah.
So Cal, Alex, thanks for being here again. Thank you for everybody out there listening or watching. Thanks to our lead torfologist, producer Tayo Yakin. Technical producer Marian Franzen, who is like our Richard Edlund, and Jamie Parslow, who's like our Douglas Slocum, which we didn't even talk about Douglas Slocum that much.
No, we didn't.
The cinematography and the shadows in this movie are incredible, and we didn't mention it a single time. Man, like the way that Douglas Slocum photographed the most iconic, like one of the most iconic silhouettes of all time, right? Like a shadow of Indiana Jones on a wall, you recognize it immediately. And we didn't even talk about it once. But anyway,
I'm shocked we didn't. That's crazy.
Jamie Parslow is our Douglas Slocum is the point that I'm trying to make. And Dan, who he'll be sealed into the well of souls for 1,000 years to see if that makes him in any way valuable. And if you want to hear us without seeing us, if you're into the whole audio only thing, we're on all the usual places that you find your podcasts. So track us down on the platform of your choosing. Also, one last bit of housekeeping before we get out of here. This is our last official episode of season 1. So congrats, guys, for we did a whole season. How about that?
Oh my God.
I know.
Talked about a lot of movies.
We talked about a bunch of movies. We're going to take a little break, come back in the new year. We've got another couple of two-handers, actually, some not top 100s with just Cal and Alex coming up sort of in between seasons here. So be on the lookout for some not top 100s before we come back for our second season and whatever nonsense Dan has planned to inflict on us. This is getting more and more like Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah, except the movies. Except the movies
are great. Yeah, that's kind of what we're after. All right. Well, until season 2, we'll see you then, guys. Stay safe. Be good, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.